Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard and welcome to patch 3.2, Tournament Tactician, Tournament Tier List, all that good stuff. Last week we were pretty on the money, especially for a week 1 tier list, which means that there's not an insane amount of updates that are going to be coming at you today, mostly because Lee Sin Bandletree Darkness was the thing that I kind of called out as the lineup that I would have run last weekend. It did very well both in the Runeterra Life Open and EMEA Fight Night, winning both of those events. So at the top end of things, there's really not a lot to change on the tier list, but there are a few minor updates down in like Tier 2 and Tier 3 that I want to spend a little bit of time on, not an insane amount. This is going to be a short one. But I like to use last weekend's tournaments as well as tournaments that happen over the week, and especially Fight Night now that it is in the appropriate format, to give you guys a little bit more information into where I'm getting, my statistics from and all these different things, what I am using to influence the tournament tier list. So I went to look at the Mastering Runeterra midweek tournaments that they were doing, because they were doing daily pay-to-enter tournaments. They, I think, averaged about 20 people each, which is usually smaller than I'll look at, but they were weekday tournaments, and honestly, I'm just kind of desperate for data at this point, and unfortunately found the deck lists behind a paywall. Now, obviously, I'm not going to condemn an article website for putting up a paywall. You need to pay your writers somehow, but I don't love deck lists being what is put behind the paywall. I'd prefer it to be like opinion pieces on improving your game, maybe even deeper level strategy, but just deck lists, to me, should be freely available public information. But that's really neither here nor there. It's just kind of a personal thing. And then I went to look at Fight Night, and EMEA Fight Night is just not happening. And there was no tweet from Giant Slayer about it as far as I can tell, and they tweeted a schedule earlier this week saying that Fight Night Legends EU would be at today at noon. It's currently a little after 4 o'clock, and it just never fired. And as far as I can tell, there was no tweet about it not firing. This is the last tweet from them. So that kind of sucks. And the roadmap sucked. Like, I'm not happy this week, guys. It's kind of what I'm getting at here. So I'm going to do what I can about it. Maybe start compiling deck lists somewhere on my own. Maybe finally make a Discord server to put them all in or something along those lines. But that's a problem for this weekend, Boulevard. Speaking of, the online league series is happening. Sign-ups in the description below, as always, and you can come watch me and JDoza cast that. Now, as for the actual tier list, as I'd mentioned, not a lot of movement here in Tier 1, as those decks sort of performed as expected. Tier 2, also not a lot of movement. Nami, Twisted Fate, is a deck that I do want to touch on, because Aikato pointed out the disparity in stats between the top performers on this deck, as well as the general population on this for ladder stats, with the top end generally having about a 60 to 65% win rate, and your average player having about 45. Good players are going to bring Nami TF. They really like playing Twisted Fate. They really like playing pick a card, really. The more cards you draw, the more agency you have in a matchup, typically. So good players really like these Twisted Fate style decks, and Nami, of course, just still a pretty broken card. She levels up a little bit harder, but because you're running a Piltover and Zon variant, you are running things like Flash of Brilliance to help facilitate that. So I would expect Nami Twisted Fate to perform pretty well this weekend. The top players just like this deck right now. It doesn't really fit into sort of the what I want to call the traditional landscape of the meta, where you have these Bandle City Go Wide decks, you have the Go Tall decks that are going to be attached decks, and those are still kind of getting figured out. I'm aware that there are a few attached variants running around. None of them have really stuck out to me as crazy good, other than Papercraft OTK, but that's not really an attached deck. I'm talking about Fey decks. I haven't really seen any Fey decks that are catching my eye just yet, and that might be an oversight on my part. Last week, I sort of overlooked Trundle Timelines because I thought it was a little bit cheesy, and I thought the longer time went on, the more Trundle Timelines is going to fall off, but it did perform at the opening weekend, and I did expect it to fall off before that, so I do have it on the tier list for this week, but I am expecting it to continue to fall off until it is eventually taken off the tier list. But Nami TF, definitely something to look out for. I don't think you can necessarily counter it, but maybe you should be thinking about hey, what is a lineup with this going to look like? If I'm entering a tournament and there's only 50 people, what am I banning against the people that brought this? What are they bringing alongside it? I can't really quantify that for you, but it is something that I just want you to be aware of, that this is something you might run into. And then Bandle Burn, we're not really seeing a lot of aggro right now. We're seeing Bandle Burn do okay. We're not really seeing it alongside Spiders or Pirates or Draven Rumble, just because AKX getting pushed out of the meta really seems to have shaken things up more than the release of A Curious Journey, which kind of sucks. I mean, which is weird, because A Curious Journey has so many different decks, but a lot of them are just decks that are putting Gnar into them, and not so much new archetypes. So that's kind of why we haven't seen an influx of new decks. We just see a lot of old decks with Gnar in them. And then down in tier 3, we just kind of trimmed the fat a little bit of the leftovers from last week, took off like Viego and things like that I really don't expect to see too often. Field of Rush still hanging around on the tier list. You might not be seeing this too often, but What Am I is still running it in his tournament lineup alongside Lee Sin, and I can never remember his third deck. It might even be Darkness or something. But What Am I has been really big on Field of Rush, and it is performing well for him, and I think eventually other players are going to pick up on that, especially because What Am I has been on a little bit of a tear as of late, getting like second place in one of these MR tournaments, and then first place in another, and then winning the Runeterra League. So I think players are going to start looking at What Am I and maybe picking up on this Field of Rush style of gameplay, or just hard control in general. Maybe it'll be a Nivea, who knows, but Shadow Isle failure control, definitely not down and out, I would say. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is Galio Dragons. So Ryan F. and Miles got second place in the first 2 MR tournaments, and this is sort of the first Galio deck that has caught my eye. Essentially, it's just, you're running you're not like all in on a formidable deck, but you do run sort of the good ones in the Petrified Broadwing, but it's more of like a Mountain Drake deck almost, and I do really like Mountain Drake as a card, so it is interesting to me to see this sort of popping up. Obviously, Overwhelm is very good right now into all of the Go Wide Bandle City decks. I can't really speak to, like, is this a super powerful deck? Is this going to stick around? But Galio has been absent from the tier list, and I feel like he should be on there somewhere, but I haven't really seen players find a consensus on what the Galio deck is. So I did want to highlight this one that has had some good performance in tournaments this weekend. If you're looking for, like, a baseline, like, that you want to play Galio, but you really haven't put too much testing into it. You're just, like, coming in for a tournament this weekend, you're like, oh, I really like Galio. What is a Galio deck for me to run? This is what I would probably hand you. And then, yeah, Toronto Timeline's got put on. But outside of that, that this is your top end. There's really not a lot of room for debate in that one. There's still a lot of experimentation being done. We're still in a very wide meta, especially since AKX has been knocked down a few pegs. But overall, just not a lot of information getting passed around right now. And I will do what I can about that. And that's that. So, if I were playing in a tournament this weekend, I would probably just run back the Lee Sin Bandletree Darkness. I've played a bit of Yordles and Arms. I've been playing a lot more ladder than I usually do as of late. And I still just Lee Sin Bandletree Darkness are just the decks that I would bring absolutely no questions asked, is what it is. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. As always, my name is Boulevard. Don't forget to sign up for the online league series in the description below. Win yourself some cool cash for the weekend before we get into March, and prepare for a very long month of nothing. I don't think there's anything of note happening in March for Legends of Runeterra. I don't think we're getting a new balance patch. We're not getting any closer to the seasonal, which I believe is now in May, but I think the tournament tab still says April, or at least it did yesterday. Anyway, guys, have fun in your tournament this weekend. I will be there casting. Come check it out in chat. I will be tweeting about it. Follow me on Twitter at casterboulevard to figure out when we are going live. We'll be on twitch.tv/jdoza. GG. Good luck.